So we're going to talk today about speculation. Von. Von translates in Arabic as thought. Like how you'd say, I think the issue is like this. That means I surmise. I suppose. That means that you're saying what is weighty to me and what is likely to me is such and such. And that's basically that you're saying, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to rely on this. So that's what we're going to call that speculation. We have some other words here like supposition, and I said some other words to you too, like surmise. So we want to talk about what that is, and we want to talk about some of its application in the religion. Now, this is very, very important because many religious rules suffice with this, as you'll see. And so, speculation or supposition in this context is what you deem to be the more probable of two possibilities. When we say that's what you deem it, that means that this is relative. So, what you might think is right, someone else might know is right. Yeah, and you might have knowledge according to what you know knowledge means. And another person might be skeptical that it's right. That means he doesn't think it's right, even though it could be. Even according to him, it could be right, but he doesn't think it is. So it's relative. It's what you deem to be the more probable of two possibilities. Two possibilities. Yani, for example, true or false. Possibly true or possibly false. You deem it probably true, or you deem it probably false. So what's probable to you is what you think it is. That's your speculation or your supposition, or that's what you surmise. When it is extremely strong and likely, it can figuratively be called knowledge. That means sometimes you could be wrong, but the likelihood of you being wrong is so far fetched to you that this supposition you have could be called knowledge, but it's not real knowledge. Just for the fact of you acknowledging that you could be wrong. When you have real knowledge, you're not wrong. So the speculation is the probable possibility, and the unlikely possibility causes skepticism. So I'm going to use the word skepticism here, and skepticism here does not mean doubt. Here in what I'm saying to you, the way I'm using it. It's because doubt is 50-50. Doubt is that neither side is more likely for you. If it's true versus false, when you're doubting, according to what we are studying together here, then it's not more likely true or more likely false. That's called shak, doubt. But when it's more likely false, so it's not 50-50 here, then we're going to call that here skepticism. And what that means is that you acknowledge within yourself that you could be wrong and that the issue could be true, for example, but you don't think it is. And so you would say, I'm skeptical about it being true, or I'm skeptical about it being false. So our range should be clear for you. The knowledge is to realize something as it is truly. The speculation is to think that it's probably true. The doubt is to not be more inclined to it being true or false. The skepticism is to be more inclined to it being false than true. And what's after that is ignorance, and that has its own section. In this realm, the scholars have mentioned a precious rule. إذا ثبت الاحتمال سقط القطع في الاستدلال. Rhymes. إذا ثبت الاحتمال سقط القطع في الاستدلال. When another possible answer is confirmed, possible answer, just possible. When another possible answer is confirmed, the certainty of the evidence is dropped. You can't have certainty in the evidence if there are two possible answers. So know, O intelligent Muslim, that ijtihad is only performed in the absence of definitive evidence. So then means this word ijtihad here, or this issue of ijtihad, is relevant here under speculation. That's really what an ijtihad is. Speculation doesn't mean a guess. So know, O intelligent Muslim, that ijtihad is only performed in the absence of definitive evidence. In the absence of definitive evidence, does the mujtahid make ijtihad if he has an explicit ayah from the Quran saying the rule that he wants to know the answer for? No, he'll just say what the Quran says. And likewise, if he has an authentic hadith, authentic explicit hadith, would the scholar make an ijtihad to know the rule that he wants to know the answer for? No, he would not. And there's a hadith for that that could be squeezed in here. Maybe I will, inshallah, after this. That's the hadith when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Al-Yaman. He was going to be their scholar. He was a mujtahid. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "How will you rule?" He said, "I will rule by the book of Allah." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "And if you don't find the answer there," he said, "then by the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "And if you don't find the answer there," he said, "then I will make ijtihad to the best of my ability." So if he doesn't have an explicit ayah from the Quran giving him the answer, and he doesn't have explicit, authentic sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam giving him an answer, then that means that he lacks definitive evidence. That's called in Arabic dalil qat'i. Dalil qat'i. Dalil qat'i, definitive evidence. So evidence is two kinds. Definitive evidence, dalil qat'i, and there is speculative evidence. Speculative evidence. That's called dalilun dhanni. Dalil dhanni, from the word dhann. That's what we're talking about now. Dhann. Speculation. Speculative proof. So ijtihad is only performed in the absence of definitive evidence. Dalil qat'i. Therefore, its result is a speculation, one's greatest effort to arrive at accuracy. I recently heard a debate. A person was defending Muawiyah, and he was saying, Muawiyah, he made an ijtihad, And he made his ijtihad from the Quran, and therefore he had definitive evidence. That's such an ignorant thing to say. But it wasn't my debate, though. It wasn't my discussion. I was just listening. That's such an ignorant thing to say. To say he made ijtihad, he had an ayah from the Quran, so he had definitive evidence. In the first place, he wouldn't have made ijtihad if he had definitive evidence. He wouldn't have made ijtihad if he had a definitive evidence. Therefore, the result of ijtihad is a speculation. It is one's greatest effort to arrive at accuracy. His ijtihad is his greatest effort to arrive at accuracy. Without one's greatest effort, it's not ijtihad. Ijtihad means, by definition, great effort. Yani, it means exertion. So if you wanted to pick up a piece of paper that doesn't take effort, that's not an ijtihad, because it's too easy. Now, I am bringing this word ijtihad here to you. Perhaps you realize that I'm talking about it almost in an open way, and I am really. I gave you some examples about mujtahids making ijtihad from the Quran and the Sunnah, but this issue of ijtihad is something broad. It's not only restricted to what might jump to you when we talk about ijtihad. Like, you might say, no one can make ijtihad but a mujtahid. Okay, that's true, but what does it take to be a mujtahid? Then you might say, well, it requires so much qualifications. But really, the answer to that question, what it takes to be a mujtahid, the answer to that question is, it depends on the issue. Depends on the issue that requires ijtihad. Sometimes you, as a layman, will be actually a mujtahid, just not like a Shafi'i. You won't be making ijtihad like a Shafi'i or Abu Hanifa, but you'll be making an ijtihad that's within your capabilities. What if you had two containers of water and you knew one of them was contaminated with najasa and you didn't know which one? Then you might make an ijtihad. You'll make an ijtihad to determine which one is the clean one and which one is the filthy one. What if you were trapped in a basement and you couldn't see the sun for many, many, many days? You don't know what time it is and you don't know if Ramadan came in or not. Then you're going to make an ijtihad to determine if you should start fasting or not. Then you're going to be a mujtahid. So here are some principles about ijtihad. Ijtihad in general, whether you're a top mujtahid like a Shafi'i, or whether you're a layman who's trying to figure out if your water is clean or not, or you're a layman trying to determine your ijtihad for the qibla, or trying to determine your qibla. These are general principles about ijtihad. Ijtihad is invalid without valid evidence in the first place. Valid evidence. So, for example, can the mujtahid, the top mujtahid, can he make ijtihad with the Bible? Say, look what I found in the Bible. Therefore, the judgment of this issue is that it's haram. No, it's not valid because it's not evidence. And likewise, as we're going to say, that's why you can't use the shape of the earth when you determine your qibla, because the shape of the earth is not evidence. People are using to face the qibla something that's not an evidence. And they say, well, this is our ijtihad. They're making ijtihad using something as an evidence when that thing is not an evidence. Or also, like we're going to say, they use the distance between towns. They say, this is the shorter distance, this is the longer distance, we're going to face the shorter distance. The distance is not an evidence in the qibla. Ijtihad is invalid without valid evidence. And ijtihad is invalid in the face of definitive evidence. If you have definitive evidence, you can't make ijtihad, it won't be valid. That's why if you could see the Kaaba, for example, you're not allowed to use the sun. You're not allowed to use the North Star to face the Qibla, and you can see the Kaaba. It's just like if the scholar had an explicit ayah from the Quran. He can't make ijtihad and there's an explicit ayah from the Quran. You can't make ijtihad and you can see the Kaaba with your own eyes. Also, a new ijtihad does not invalidate an old one because it is also a speculation. Ijtihad only makes you arrive at a speculation. You make your ijtihad, you put forth your greatest effort, and you don't stop until you say, I can't do more than this. This is the best that I could do. All of my evidence has pointed me to this. And so I go by this. So that's your ijtihad. Then another time you say, I'm going to make ijtihad again. So you make another ijtihad and you come to a different answer. So this new answer you got, does it invalidate the old one, like in the case of Qibla? You made ijtihad at a place because you can't see the Kaaba. So you don't have definitive evidence. So you made your ijtihad at some location for the Qibla. Then at another time, you made a new ijtihad and came up to a different Qibla. You have to repeat your prayers? No. Why? Because as a rule, ijtihad does not invalidate ijtihad. Because it's also a speculation. In the first place, the second ijtihad did not make you arrive at something that's definitively true. The second ijtihad doesn't make you arrive at something definitively true. So how can you say that your first ijtihad is invalid? It's going to be a speculation versus a speculation. That's why a Shafi'i or any other mujtahid could have two sayings about one issue, and it's permissible to take either saying. When the mujtahid makes a new ijtihad and he has a second saying about an issue he already had an ijtihad on, it would be just like a mujtahid differing with a different mujtahid, with another mujtahid. His differing with himself, because he has two different ijtihads, is like one mujtahid differing with another one. It's the same thing. Just like you could follow Abu Hanifa or Malik or Shafi'i or Ahmed. If a Shafi'i has two ijtihads on one issue, you can take either one. Taking his new saying or his old saying is going to be like taking from Abu Hanifa or Malik. It's all ijtihad. And speculation does not invalidate speculation. Certainty invalidates speculation. What is it that's going to have to make you repeat your prayer when you know that you were wrong? Not that you made a new ijtihad and you think that your second one is more accurate than your first one. You think so. That's not going to invalidate the first one. Rather, when you, for one way or another, knew that your first one was absolutely incorrect, then that ijtihad is invalidated by the knowledge. It became invalidated by your knowledge of its incorrectness. Let me know if that's not clear for you. And also, as a general rule, a mujtahid cannot follow a mujtahid. When we say that if someone has a different qibla, you can't follow him, even if it's just a few degrees different from yours, but it's not your ijtihad. If you made ijtihad for the qibla and your best friend made ijtihad for the qibla, the two of you were together and you came up with two different directions, then you cannot follow each other. This is not fitna and it's not bad or anything. This is right. This is correct application of the religion. A mujtahid cannot follow a mujtahid. Your inability to follow your best friend's qibla is just like how a Shafi'i can't follow Abu Hanifa. In principle, it's the same. It's just two different levels. Yani, two different arenas. Two different arenas. It's like, for example, what's the lowest belt in karate? Brown belt? I don't know. White belt? I don't know. So if you're a brown belt or white belt in karate, then yani, you can't do what the black belts can do. They're in a different arena than you are. You need to go to your arena. But you are mujtahid though in that issue. And they are mujtahids in their issue, but they are just on a whole nother level than you are. And they're dealing with something that you can't deal with. You're not qualified. If the issue that lacks indisputable evidence is a question about the lawful or unlawful, if the issue that lacks indisputable evidence, so what is indisputable evidence? Indisputable evidence is going to be an explicit ayah from the Quran or an explicit mutawatir hadith. Explicit mutawatir hadith, not just mutawatir only, explicit and mutawatir. So when we say explicit means you can't get another meaning out of its words, so it's explicit. When we say it's mutawatir means there's no way uh, uh, to invalidate the authenticity of the report. So the report itself is confirmed, and the words of this confirmed report do not accept alternative interpretation. Then this is indisputable evidence. So an explicit ayah from the Quran or an explicit mutawatir hadith. This is indisputable evidence. Or a confirmed definitive intellectual argument. A confirmed definitive intellectual argument would be an indisputable evidence. If the issue that lacks indisputable evidence is a question about the lawful or unlawful, the halal and the haram, so there is no explicit text from the book, nor is there an explicit authentic sunnah, nor is there a consensus. So there's no indisputable evidence for the issue. Then the qualified mujtahid. In this case, he wants to get to the answer. Is it lawful or is it unlawful? The qualified mujtahid has, yani the one who's going to deal with this is someone who has memorized the verses and hadiths related to judgments. There are verses of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet pertaining to rules. And you might not even sometimes, because of not being qualified, know that this hadith or ayah has a rule in it because it's a story. So all you saw was the story aspect of it, and you didn't even realize there's a rule in there because you don't have enough knowledge. You're not qualified here. So the mujtahid will have memorized the verses and the hadiths related to judgments. And he knows their chains of narration, those hadiths. He knows their chains of narration. And he knows the narrators of the chains. That means he knows their biographies. Not just he knows the chain of narration, like he can recite to you from Fulan, from Fulan, from Fulan. Not just that, but each Fulan in the chain, he can tell you. Fulan, he is Abu Fulan, the son of Fulan, Al-Fulani. He was born at this time and he died at this time. And he traveled to this place and this place and this place, and he learned from Fulan and Fulan and Fulan. And from the first one, he learned this, 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 and this. And from the second one, he learned this, this, and this. From the third one, he read on him this and this and this, etc. And Fulan said about him this, and Fulan said about him this. So he doesn't just know the chains, he also knows the biographies of the narrators in the chains. And he knows, for example, not only who did he learn from, who did he teach? And this Fulan, he was the Sheikh of Fulan and of Fulan. And he knows the abrogating and abrogated texts, ayahs of the Quran and hadiths. Abrogating and abrogated. The abrogated one is the one that comes first. An ayah from the Quran comes with a rule, or the Prophet says a hadith with a rule. Then a new text would come after that, the second one, abrogating or abolishing, if you want, the first one. So the mujtahid knows those texts, the abrogating and abrogated texts. He needs that so that he can make proper ijtihad. And he knows the general and the specific. Alhamdulillah. He knows the general and the specific. He needs to know that so that, yani basically what the scholars say is, the mujtahid has to know how to prioritize the proofs. How to prioritize the proofs. What does that mean? Like, for example, the abrogated one comes first. The abrogating one comes second because it's the one that abolishes the other one. So it has to come second. And the general is the one with the open words, and specific is the one with the tighter words. So how do you prioritize them? By limiting the general one according to the specific one. That's what we do in the case of the innovations. The Wahhabis take that general hadith. وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ. Every innovation is misguidance. And then they run with it, as they say. But there's the hadith that's specific. من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة فله أجرها وأجر من عمل بها. Anyone who paves a good path in Islam shall have its reward. This means anyone who starts a good practice in Islam will have its reward. Both of these are authentic. If you take both of them as they are and you don't prioritize them, then you're going to actually make them contradict each other. But when you say, one of them is open, its words are open because it says every, and the other one, its words are not open, and both of them are authentic, so we can't throw away either of them, then we need to merge them. And when we merge them, then we know that the open one is really not as open as its words suggest. وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ. Every innovation is misguidance. It means most of them are misguidance because some of them are guidance. Or it means every innovation that does not comply with the religion is misguidance. But those that do comply with the religion are not misguidance. So this is how the mujtahid knows how to prioritize the proofs. And he knows the absolute and the restricted. Absolute means doesn't have any description, doesn't have any qualifier. Like if an ayah says you have to free a slave, you have to free a slave. So okay, doesn't say what kind, does just yani male, female, Muslim, non-Muslim. It's open. And restricted is like if another ayah says you have to free a believing slave. So how do you put those together? How do you prioritize the proofs here? You're going to say, that one that's open is restricted, actually, because there's another one that's not open. So we have to put them together. Or to give you an idea of what it means to be absolute. What did Prophet Musa say to the Israelites? إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. Allah commands you to sacrifice a cow. Didn't say what kind of cow. Didn't say any descriptions. Just sacrifice a cow. So if you just take those words as they are, then it means bring anything that's called a cow, and you will have done what you were told to do. If someone says to you, give me a pen, then you give him a pen. Then you gave him, you did what he told you to do. Even if the pen doesn't write, you still did what he told you to do. What if he says, this pen doesn't write? You'd say, well, you didn't say, give me a writing pen. You just said, give me a pen. So the mujtahid, amongst his knowledge, amongst what makes him qualified, is that he knows what's open, absolute, and what's restricted, so that he can prioritize the proofs and come to the right answer, while having mastered Arabic like an ancient Arab. And he must also know what the mujtahids have agreed upon, so not to breach the consensus. Yani he needs to know the consensus of the mujtahids before him. And above that is a great condition for ijtihad, which is genius level intellect. And this genius level intellect, that is possibly, as it's stated here in English, that's possibly an understatement, especially if you want to go by non-Muslim standards, what they would consider genius. Because, for example, take Imam an-Nawawi. Imam an-Nawawi, rahimahullah, he is a great inspiration to the students of knowledge. Allah made him the Shaykh of the Shafi'is. Yani, those who came after him and those who didn't exceed him, even those who exceeded him, who came after him, they still benefited from his knowledge, from his books, for example. If he were to take an IQ test today, he would probably be regarded as a genius, and even someone lower than him. Those, even an-Nawawi didn't reach the level of an absolute mujtahid like a Shafi'i. You talk about those mujtahids, probably just the word genius alone is an understatement. Yani, I'd tell you some stories if I didn't want to try to cover more information before the time runs out. And the imitator is anyone not at this level. So someone asked, did Sheikh Abdullah, basically the question is, I'm rewording the question. Basically the question is, does Sheikh Abdullah have these qualifications? So I personally don't know. I cannot verify that, but the sheikhs call him a mujtahid, or some of them do. I heard Sheikh Samir say, but this was years ago, I don't know. I heard Sheikh Samir say, I don't know. I never heard him say otherwise since then. Okay, so I think that's clear. So he has all these qualifications because of what he's making ijtihad for. So when you say only a mujtahid can make ijtihad, yes, that is true. But ijtihad for what? That's the issue. If the ijtihad is for the halal and the haram, then that type of mujtahid has all these qualifications. And if the issue that lacks indisputable evidence is facing the Kaaba, which means you cannot see the building with your own eyes. If you could see the building with your own eyes, then you would have indisputable evidence of the direction of the Kaaba. And then you use that indisputable evidence that gives you knowledge, you use that to face the Qibla, in your prayer. If you lack that, so you can't see the building with your own eyes, then now you lack indisputable evidence. Then what do? You take the word of someone who can see it, if he is trustworthy. That right there is not going to give you knowledge. That's just going to give you speculation. That trustworthy one, he's going to say to you, I see it. It's like this. So then you think that that's right, and the religion sufficed with that for you, and then you face the way he tells you. If you lack that also, so you don't see the building of the Kaaba and you don't have a trustworthy person who can see it informing you, then you make ijtihad using only the valid ijtihad proofs. Ijtihad for the Qibla. Now you're a mujtahid. And those proofs do not include the shape of the earth. And they do not include the shortest distance between towns. I already mentioned that for you. And if you are unable to do that, so you don't see the building, you don't have a trustworthy person informing you of what he sees, and you're not able to make an ijtihad by the ijtihad proofs for Qibla, because you're blind, or because you're a small child, you just became amazed and started praying, then it is valid to be directed by a trustworthy, knowledgeable person. In all those cases, other than seeing the building of the Kaaba, you think that you're facing the right way. And one's prayer is invalid if he skips a step. And all meticulous Muslim, know that information conveyed by a single person does not necessitate knowledge. So we're still talking about speculation here. Information conveyed by a single person does not necessitate knowledge. Rather, if it fulfills the conditions of acceptance, if this information fulfills the conditions of acceptance, it only necessitates application. That means acting. If the report is acceptable, then you act. The report being acceptable doesn't mean that it is definitively indisputable evidence. There's the hadith, لا نكاح إلا بولي وشاهدي عدل. There is no marriage except with a guardian and two trustworthy witnesses. So how did Abu Hanifa say that a woman can give herself away in marriage? If the Prophet ﷺ said, there is no marriage without a guardian, because the guardian is the one who gives the woman away. La nikaha illa biwali. Saying she can give herself away in marriage means she doesn't need a wali. How could he say that if the Prophet said otherwise? Because he doesn't rely on that hadith. I don't know what's his talk there. I don't know. How do the Hanafis explain they're not taking that hadith? But just take the picture here. Get the picture here, which is that just because it's a hadith doesn't mean that it's indisputable evidence. I was so mad when I heard that person saying what he said in that debate that I told you about at the beginning of the lesson. Saying, Muawiyah made ijtihad. He used an ayah from the Quran, and that's definitive evidence. So ignorant. That guy is a liar. He was lying to defend Muawiyah. And a lot of them do. I encountered more than one of them. Hence, if the chains of the hadiths narrated about purification, prayer, fasting, hajj, zakah, and the like were authentic, if the chains were authentic, it would be obligatory to apply them, yani to act on them. Not to believe that the Prophet ﷺ worded them in that way. This is not definite knowledge. And likewise, when the hadith is weak, they don't say the Prophet didn't say it. The hadith being weak, the hadith lacking some of the conditions of acceptance does not mean the Prophet didn't say the hadith. It just means that it's not strong enough for us to act on. Therefore, a report from an individual could be true. A single individual tells you something. It could be true. And it's not false just because he's one person. And a report from two or more individuals could still be false. And a report from two or more individuals could still be false, as long as it's not a mass narration. So two people gave you a report, three people gave you a report, four people gave you a report, could still be false. Doesn't mean it's true because two people told you or three people told you or a lot of people told you. As long as it's not mutawatir. It could be false because of the possibility of error in it. Even if that error were only due to absent-mindedness or forgetfulness, or even a slip of the tongue. And just as it is possible for the honest, accurate one to lie or be mistaken, it is possible for the liar to be honest. So that's why when someone trustworthy tells you something, you still have room to not take it in your heart. And if a liar told you something, you still have room to consider that it's true. The conditions of acceptability for reports are continuity of the chain, no one's missing from the chain. The lack of an anomaly, which I'm not going to explain right now. The lack of an effective defect. The precision of the narrator. The precision of the narrator, yani the one who's relating to you, is a precise one. He's an accurate one, usually. If he's not a prophet, he could make a mistake. His tongue could slip. He could possibly lie. Excuse me. He could even have a delusion. He thinks that he knows something he doesn't know. He could swear up and down that it's right, but it would be wrong. And he's a good, pious person. That's his precision. And the trustworthiness of the narrator is a condition. There's a difference between his precision and his trustworthiness. His precision means his accuracy. His trustworthiness means the goodness of his behavior. We could be a very foul person and he's so accurate. That's possible. And a sixth condition is a strengthener when needed. That means a backup report. Like by itself, it's weak, but when you add more reports to it, it gets stronger and stronger. Now that I told you these principles, this means you can grade hadiths? No, it doesn't mean you can grade hadiths, but it does enable you just to be more careful person, to be more mindful about what you hear before you take it. Didn't we hear recently that the president of Iran, his airplane went, or his helicopter went down? Like, yani, before somebody knew it went down, they say, he got assassinated. Don't even know where you got it from. Just because you'd like to think he got assassinated, you're going to say he got assassinated. Now, I don't know if he was assassinated or he wasn't. Of course, all I'm saying here is when you learn this information makes you more careful. Don't be one of those people who just say, I heard, oh, I heard, oh, I heard. From anywhere. Where'd you hear it from? From a clip that you saw on Twitter or something. Oh, I heard. And the reasons for rejection return to two things. Why reject the report? This goes back to two things. Either an interruption in the chain or negative criticism of the narrator. Yani someone's missing from the chain, like when they tell you in the news, our sources say, and you have no idea who their sources are. And that's their practice. They do it so much that people take it for granted. Simply that it's granted that they trust the news station. So when they say our sources say, the people say, authentic. This is so weak. Or negative criticism of the narrator. So a chain's severance could be obvious or not. If someone's missing from the chain, might be obvious or might not be obvious. Someone is missing from the chain, but requires knowledge to know someone's missing. Like sometimes if you listen to some news reports or some reports, they would say something like as if they're reporting from authentic source. But if you really look at their wording, if you really investigate the way they're wording it, they're not taking it from authentic source, but they just put their words in such a way as to give you an impression. So the gap in the chain is not obvious. And this gap in the chain might be from the beginning of the chain or from the end of the chain. And it might be one narrator at a time, or it could be consecutive narrators. Of course, there's a lot of information to unravel there. We're not going to unravel all of that. That's from hadith terminology, as you could probably surmise. You might think this is from hadith terminology. From all the clues what he's saying here, I think that this is taken from hadith terminology. And a report might be rejected due to negative criticism of the narrator. What's wrong with him? His person might be unknown. Yani he's unknown person. Who is he? Or his reliability may be unknown. You know who he is, but you don't know his reliability. Or he might be someone who's frequently mistaken. I might have told you in some lessons. I had uh, at least two sheikhs who were, for me, frequently mistaken. They made enough mistakes that I don't really rely on what they say. I wouldn't I wouldn't cite them. Or unless I didn't have anyone else to cite, and then I might say, it reached me this like this. Or I might say, I didn't hear it from a strong source. Or he might be delusional. That means he thinks he says what's right, but it's not right. Or he might have a bad memory. He may be a major sinner, or he might be accused of lying, or he might even be a known fabricator. Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani summarized all these cases into two categories. One which questions the narrator's precision, and one which questions his trustworthiness, as we already said. وَسُبْحَانَ wa bihamdih. Allah enabled us to get through that whole section. Alhamdulillah. So that one there, maybe that was a lot of information. And also maybe that was challenging for your mind. And maybe it was also presented swiftly. So I suggest that you review that. Inshallah, I'll put the recording out soon in YouTube. And if you want, review that a few times so that soaks in. Any question? The Hafiz is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. He is al-Hafiz. Anytime they say the Hafiz, it's him. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So be mujtahids, brothers and sisters, in issues that you can be. Stay in your lane, of course. Don't get big head, think you can do what a Shafi'i does or something like that. But sometimes you can make an ijtihad, actually. You're going to see some issue. You're going to say, I don't know. There's no way for me to know definitively. There is no way for me to know definitively. But I'm going to put these clues together here, and I think this one is the one. And then you go by it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك